Do you want to get a slate down there?
Ready? I'm going to do this right for face, so I apologize
Oh,
in
we've been
advance.
rolling.
It's okay.
And Jordan Page.
That was cool.
Okay, if you could maybe just sort of give us an idea of what would the what should people expect tonight from your performance?
What can people expect? Well, I believe that whether you play for 10 people or 10,000 people, you do the same show. You give just as much, and there's nights where you're on and nights where you're not quite as on, and this is one of those events that I'm really passionate about, and I'm really excited and have a great sort of nervous energy about playing for this crowd tonight. So I'm going to play mostly probably all original material. I've got a few new songs that are not on my current album that I've just written that I'm going to try out tonight. So I'll try some new stuff. I've got about a half an hour to play. It's about 5 or 6 songs. So I really just want to inspire folks and illuminate some issues that a lot of folks may not be privy to. On the flight down here, I sat next to a young man who had no idea that the NDAA was just passed. They hadn't even heard of it, didn't know what it was. And I invited him to come tonight, so I hope he comes. And I hope people learn a lot tonight. I mean, there's some really brilliant speakers speaking tonight, and I hope just to present the information in another way, through the avenue of music. So I'm gonna rock out. I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna hopefully put on a great show.
Could you tell us a little bit about the song that you were wanting me to shoot on? This is
Yeah.
specifically for Ron Paul. Did you say was?
Yeah. Ron Paul came into my life in 2008. The first Liberty type event that I did was his last event of his campaign, which was the Revolution March in front of the Capitol in the mall in D.C. And there were about 15,000 people, and that was a really incredible experience for me. And since his last campaign, I've really hit the pavement and evolved as a person and as an artist and as a writer. And I wrote a song for him in honor of him, really, in 2010 called Liberty, which became my most popular song so far, and the title track of my new album, Liberty. And but a friend of mine asked me to write him a campaign song for 2012, and I really sat down and thought about what his message is: the anti-war message, the sound money economics message, the end of corruption and returning to using legal tender and obeying the Constitution. And I thought about the world and our country and what's going on, and I just sat down and asked some questions, and I think the best reflective protest songs are the ones that ask questions, and the song's full of questions, and but it also takes a stand, and I definitively wrote the song in honor of Congressman Paul and his 30-40 year struggle in government against tyranny. Absolutely. It's called The Light of Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
And he loves it. I played it for him 3 or 4 times now. He really digs it.
Well, I was going to ask you something along those lines. Is coming to these sort of events where there's sort of a lot of sort of philosophical and academic conversations going on at the same time. How do you feel about coming in as an artist and sharing sort of a different way to present these same ideas?
I think it really livens things up. A lot of times there'll be events like this where there's a lot of speakers, and they're dynamic, amazing speakers like we have tonight. But the music brings another way of saying the same thing. But it's funny because there are a lot of folks out there that really like my music but don't agree with my politics or my message, and that's really amazing to me. That they like the songs. That means the songs got in first. The music got inside them, and then they processed the information, and it didn't jive. There was last year my manager sent my album to a radio guru up in Boston, and he loved it and said, I'm going to play this all over the Northeast. And then he looked me up and saw that my association with Ron Paul, and he called him right back and said, I'll never play this. So music has a very interesting way of penetrating the soul without you knowing it. And so it's also a very non-threatening medium, because if you like the beat of a song or the melody or feel the passion in the performance, you might give credence to the message where maybe you heard someone speak about the same issue and it just didn't sit right with you, but you heard it in a song and you let it in. You gave it a chance because it was an artistic expression rather than simply intellectual.
As we've been sort of interviewing all these different people that are speaking or presenting themselves tonight, they're coming from different backgrounds, and they're all sort of drawn to this cause and these causes, maybe for a very personal reason. And so we're kind of wanting to be able to have each person talk about how they feel about this diversity of people that come together on this, because sometimes there doesn't seem to be a lot of common things, but then they start talking, and that's what becomes the common theme. Could you talk a little bit about the different backgrounds of the people you find coming to these places?
You mean attending or presenting?
Mm-hmm. Both.
Oh man, it runs the gambit. It really does. Well, within the libertarian movement, there are a lot of schools of thought. You have your, more Republican-leaning and constitutionalist folks who are also very spiritual, religious people. You have your atheist, anarchist wing, and everyone in between. And I think that the cause of liberty permeates all social boundaries and ideological boundaries. And if you have, I do a lot of events all over the country for different causes, different advocacy groups, and you do see a lot of diversity. You see racial, ethnic diversity, you see spiritual diversity, and I'm coming from a Christian perspective, but that's not what I'm necessarily preaching on stage. I'm talking about freedom, but it's funny how if I'm talking with let's say a real hardcore atheist, and we don't have any common ground spiritually speaking, but our politics are exactly the same. I find a lot of Christians that I've known, we have similar beliefs about God, but absolutely polar opposite beliefs about government. And I think that these types of events are great ways of bringing people together and finding their common ground. Okay, we don't agree on this, but over here we can stand together, and it's enough. It's enough to start at least a civil conversation. People are so afraid to talk to each other, and that's been my big mission is starting a conversation. I don't necessarily consider myself a closer. I'm the guy that opens the door, and I think you have a lot. Like tonight, you have authors, you have radio hosts, you have economics experts, and you have a constitutional sheriff, a leader in the 10th Amendment movement, and you have activists like Catherine Bleich and John Bush, who take on the fusion centers. Everybody here has an area of expertise that they're the best that there is. They are the authorities on these things, and then you have me. I'm just a man with a guitar and some songs to play, but I was called to preach the gospel of liberty, of true freedom, and that includes the folks that don't agree with me. I'm especially fighting for them, for their right to disagree. That's the most important thing to me, is that we maintain those rights.
You're sort of talking about Ron Paul as being this sort of almost like a pivot point in your life that you maybe came to certain realizations, or maybe it spurred you towards a particular direction of being more vocal. But is that something that's really important to you? This bringing people together and bringing conversations together, because it seems to me that just watching you talking to some of these people as you're leaving to come to the interview, that you seem to have known them and talked to them and have this kind of warm rapport with them.
Well, I come from a philosophy that's genuinely love your neighbor, and I make friends real easy because I just have open arms for people. And a lot of folks that I've met since last night, I met for the first time. But many of the presenters that are presenting here are good friends. I've done lots of events with them and spent time with them, and I know a lot of them really well. But a lot of the folks that are working the event and are people that I've just met. It's just, I'm family. I don't care who you are. I'm family to you if you want it. That's just the way I live my life. Ron Paul being the pivot point, I mean, he wasn't the pivot point. He validated everything that I learned after the pivot point. The pivot point for me was December the 1st, 2006. And I couldn't articulate my feelings, didn't have the vocabulary, was just totally uneducated. And I woke up in the middle of the night after a really, really disturbing dream about him. He'd just given a speech that night, and I woke up and walked into my office, and half asleep I started typing on my computer, and about 7-8 minutes later a song was on the screen, and I read it after I'd written it. I wasn't reading it as I wrote it. I read it after I typed it out, and I was just completely dumbfounded by what I was on the page. And that song became The Pendulum. And The Pendulum was the first Liberty-type song that I've written. It's a social political commentary of the world and our country as it was at the end of 2006. And what I saw happening, or what it seemed what was going to happen. The song was very prophetic in a lot of ways. And I was terrified to play it. I didn't want anybody to hear it, because I was sure that it was going to cause me harm. But I found the courage to play it, and I played it at a sold-out show at the Ram's Head in Annapolis, which is a national venue. And I got up there and just did it, and I got a standing ovation. And I realized that, God, or whatever you want to call it, had given me something, and I basically said, okay, message received. But I don't understand the song. I don't even know what the song is talking about in a lot of places. And so I started doing my research and did my homework. And I found out that everything in the song that I didn't understand was real and was true and was really going on. And it wasn't until, almost a year later that I discovered Ron Paul and learned about him and his fight for freedom in government and trying to restore our liberties. And it just blew me away that there was a whole movement out there of people who follow this guy and who understand who have understood what I'm now learning. They've understood it for years and years. And I'm just now waking up in 2007, and it was a wonderful realization to find that there was actually this person who defied the stereotypes of the typical scumbag politician who says whatever he wants to say to get elected, and just the typical murderer and thief. And there's this man who actually has principles, who stood up for them time and time again, who's never voted against the Constitution, not once in 12 terms of being a congressman. That blew me away, and that was something that I could support. Where a lot of artists are terrified to take a position, they don't want to alienate fans. I've actually built a career on taking a position and taking a stand on things. And Ron's message was instrumental in helping me to understand all the information that I'd been learning. And he's a great man. He's a wonderful man.